Hi everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Now, this week it's Clean Sport Week in the UK. Clean Sport Week is an initiative run by UKAD, that's UK Anti-Doping, and is an opportunity to come together and celebrate the important values of clean sport and support the hard work that sport in the UK is doing in the fight against doping. And this year, the main focus of Clean Sport Week is on image and performing enhancing drugs, aka IPEDs, and in particular the use of IPEDs within the gym environment. And on the show this week, I'm joined by Dr. Claire Marie Roberts to discuss all things psychology and drug use in sport. Claire Marie, thank you so much for coming on the Sports Psych Show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, so Clean Sport Week. Really interested to talk to you about this because I know you're involved quite heavily. You sit on the board, but tell me, can you give the Sports Psych Show some background? What do you do? Where are you based? Who do you work with, etc., etc.?
Yeah, so I have quite an interesting career, I think. Anyway. So I work as a sports psychology consultant. I have an academic position at the University of the West of England. I work for the Premier League in coach and football manager development. And as you say, I sit on the board of UK Anti-Doping.
And how did you actually get that position? That was an interesting position to come by.
Do you know, actually I've always been fascinated by the work of UK Anti-Doping and a very passionate clean sport advocate. So I actually saw the vacancy for non-executive directors advertised on Twitter. Okay. And I remember thinking, this would be such an interesting opportunity and a real opportunity, I guess, to be able to sort of show my passion and make a difference in clean sport. So I applied and went through quite a stringent interview process and was very surprised when they appointed me. But it's an incredible experience. I would recommend it to anybody, actually.
Absolutely. I'm on Twitter every day. I did not see this advert. I can't believe it. I'm devastated.
Right place at the right time, I think.
Wow,
with Twitter.
Not at all. But so, what does your? I suppose I'm guessing it's not day to day. What's your involvement with the organisation?
So it's really about sort of setting strategy for the organisation and helping, I guess, ask questions of the organisation to make sure that we as an organisation are going in the right direction. For some key sort of decisions on sort of landmark cases and things like that, the board are asked for input and a sort of quality assurance, I guess. So it's at a sort of relatively high level, helping to steer the organisation in the right direction and making sure that the right decisions are taken at the right time.
And is that quite hands-on, or is that sort of more of a part-time role?
Yeah, so it's more of a part-time role. Although I guess it's one of those roles that I encounter in my sort of day-to-day life working in applied sport. So it's just a great opportunity to be able to sort of look at things from a different perspective. So I can see the impact that UK Anti-Doping are having in applied sport from obviously working on the ground on a sort of day-to-day level, but at the same time having an insight into all of the sort of decision-making processes that go on behind some of the work that they do is fascinating. But my role on the board is part-time. So
tell me about Clean Sport Week. Is this a fairly new initiative?
Well, Clean Sport Week has actually been running for a few years now, and it's just an opportunity for everybody to sort of refocus on the primary purpose of the work of UK Anti-Doping and to really promote some of the initiatives that they're running, promote some of the things that we understand about clean sport, some key themes, and I guess just to sort of get it out into the public space for the public to understand a little bit more about what the organisation's doing and what they're focusing on. And this week, Clean Sport Week this week has got a focus on image and performance enhancing drugs, or IPEDs, as you said in your introduction, which is a key target for the organisation and a real growing concern, not just from a sort of clean sport perspective, but also from a public health perspective.
I suppose the public at large would perceive drugs as a problem at the very elite level of sport. But this focus on the gym environment suggests an everyday problem for recreational athletes and recreational gym goers.
Exactly. So, yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. So, I think previously, as you say, performance-enhancing drugs were very much solely associated with the elite athlete. And what we see now in society is certainly for the image and performance-enhancing drugs, or the IPEDs, that the key population at risk are recreational gym users. So we also might think that it's associated with bodybuilding, and to a certain degree it is, but actually, the main risk is with just the everyday person that's going into the gym and keeping fit and wanting to achieve, I guess, a healthy body. But there's another step to that, and that's when it perhaps goes too far, and where the real primary concern for the individual is image.
I was going to ask you, why are people tempted to take IPEDs? It seems like such a dangerous, risky thing to do, especially for the recreational athlete who doesn't necessarily, their life isn't on the line in terms of their living. They don't have to look a certain way. So why do they take these IPEDs?
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that we consider sort of quite regularly, and there's research out there to suggest that the motivations behind IPED use are very much sort of image focused. Okay. So individuals wanting to perhaps look fit and ripped and bulky in the context of the men that are IPED users. Mm-hmm. But also there are some image and performance enhancing drugs that increase the colour of your skin, for example, that have like a tanning effect. There's drugs that obviously build muscle and things like that. But then you've got the whole sort of issue of taking drugs to try to ameliorate the side effects of IPEDs. So it's not just IPEDs. It's the motivation behind that is relatively simple. It's image focused, but some of the complications then are the drugs that people have to take then to try to reduce the side effects associated with taking those drugs. And I think in today's society, where there is such a big focus, isn't there, in terms of social media and things like that, on the image of how you present yourself in society, it's very, very difficult to get around. It's very difficult to ignore, I think, and some people go down this route in order to perhaps cut corners or to achieve results that are unnatural and relatively quick, and of course they put themselves at risk by doing so.
Claire Marie is a psychologist as well. My thoughts around this very much are directed towards agency and our place in society, that we as human beings are constantly trying to manoeuvre ourselves within social hierarchies, find ourselves within social hierarchies, and so we're looking for ways to climb that hierarchy or gain power or find mates or procreate or whatever it might be. It's very much from an evolutionary standpoint. So I see this really as a psychosocial challenge.
I definitely agree with you there. I definitely think it's psychosocial, and actually your reflections are really interesting, and that it's quite detailed in terms of the sort of evolutionary perspective as well. And I think that's probably a relatively unexplored area, and something. I actually think it's a really good observation, and something that perhaps research should try and get onto. But I think you're right about the sort of the deeper considerations of the image concerns. I know that there are other sort of motivating factors which might be associated with muscle dysmorphia in males, or body image problems in females that have a sort of are slightly deeper rooted. So, the mental health concerns, for example. So there's a whole multitude of considerations. I don't think it's quite as easy as saying, it's one motivation for one person. There's so many different factors at work here.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's very challenging to find solutions because, again, I come back to that evolutionary notion of people are trying to find their way within the social structure that they find themselves in. They're trying to create influence and be in the best position they can possibly be, and it's got to influence personality. I can just imagine a personality dimension of openness to experience. People with higher openness to experience are likely to try different things to help them climb that social hierarchy, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think the evolutionary perspective is definitely one to consider. In the mix of everything else, I think I think one of the other considerations, which aligns with the point you're making, I think in terms of finding our way in society, is that many people will report that having this focus. This intense focus on their image will cause them to have a greater sense of self-confidence and self-efficacy, and of course, and that ties into what you're saying about where we exist as an individual within society and sort of finding our way and moving through the ranks and things like that. So, yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting perspective that you got there with from the evolutionary perspective.
So during the week, is there going to be a drive to help people find solutions? Is there any marketing out there with regard to helping gyms, helping establishments out there to be able to help the customers, their consumers of their product?
Yeah, so UK Anti-Doping and UK Active have just completed a research project where they looked at the extent of this problem in the gyms that you and I might visit. And I know that UK Anti-Doping will be releasing the results alongside UK Active this week in Clean Sport Week. And I guess the first or the primary concern for UK Anti-Doping and Clean Sport Week is to raise awareness of this problem at the sort of recreational gym user level, but also to highlight it as an issue for the gyms themselves to make sure that perhaps they can have a look at what they can do additionally to try to counteract some of the problems that we see in gyms. So, one of the things that we're considering at the moment is whether there's an opportunity to have a level of accreditation for gyms to be able to have a bit more confidence in them. So maybe the gyms might provide mandatory training to their staff and to their personal trainers on clean sport and how to train clean, for example. And also the creation of an environment that I guess does not support the IPED use amongst their users and of course amongst their staff as well. So that's something that's being looked at for the future, and there's some really interesting work going on in the Scandinavian countries that is starting to have an impact in this domain. So the results will come out this week, and the awareness raising, I guess, is the first and foremost consideration. But I guess it's to start the conversation to make sure that that gym users and gym owners know that this is a problem and that collectively we need to find solutions to do something about it.
So awareness first, with education potentially second. Education for those gym staff and the consumers of people going into gyms, and helping them understand the psychological effects of taking IPEDs.
Yeah, I actually think it's psychological effects of taking IPEDs and perhaps the psychological motivation, as in how might they end up in this position. The other thing that I didn't mention before is the fact that in some gyms this is normalised behaviour. Yeah. So, if you are just about to join a gym, for example, and that is the environment that you go into, you can understand the pressures associated with that and the pressure to conform, I guess. But one of the sort of most concerning things that we've found is the propensity of some personal trainers to be the supplier of these substances. Right. And that's something that we really need to try and tackle quite urgently, I think, because it's just an incredibly difficult situation for any sort of gym user to be in when your personal trainer is suggesting or supplying you with some of these substances.
Really challenging, a lot of pressure. So you said something interesting there about members of a gym fitting in with the gym culture. And if that gym culture has normalised the use of IPED, the use of drugs, then they might try to fit in with that social identity.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yes, that social identity, belonging to that particular gym, or identifying yourself as as a gym user, and
Yes.
And again, somebody that that has that sort of intense focus on how they look and what their particular image is. So yes, social identity is a key consideration.
Well, it's a potential coming together of quite influential forces. Social identity. I want to be part of this in-group. This is going to give me a lot of advantages here. I want to be a part of them. But also that your own individual narrative identity, which is very much, I am a gym goer. I am a big person, or I'm a strong person. This is who I am. This is how I like to be seen. This is what attracts me to others. And that's got to heavily influence your behaviour and the decisions you make for yourself.
Definitely, and I think this is key when you start to think about how to break that cycle. So it's more difficult than I think that most people imagine. So when something like that is so core to your identity and your social identity, it almost becomes more of a challenge to to intervene and to acknowledge that it's a problem and to do something about it. And one of the things that we know that users of IPED state is that they don't see a way out. It's almost like they cannot ever imagine not taking them because this identity is so deeply ingrained in them. It's a bit of a sort of catch-22 situation.
And so do you think that gym goers and personal trainers, well, especially personal trainers, need to have some education from a CBT, from a cognitive behavioural therapy perspective? Do you think that might help?
That's a really interesting proposition, Dan. I don't think that has been considered at that level. I think we're at the moment we're at the level of acknowledging that education is really important in amongst gym staff and gym owners and personal trainers. How that is delivered and what form that might take is definitely the next step in considering what is going to be the most effective. But it's interesting that you suggest from a sort of CBT perspective, and I think that actually might be a really interesting solution to a very serious problem. So can your suggestion on that, can you describe what you were sort of thinking of in terms of how that might look?
Well, I'm a big believer. So if I'm a personal trainer, and I understand what I've just said would put a whole heap of demands on personal trainers, but I have a responsibility to the public at large. If I'm a sports coach, I have a responsibility to the public at large. And this is something, Claire Marie, that I have, whether it's on Twitter or any other social media, I have a real passion going around spreading the message, or the message I believe, that sport is psychosocial. By and large, I think coaching should be driven psychosocially. I'm not convinced about four corner models whereby coaches are educated from a perspective that the physical, the tactical, the technical, the psychosocial sides of sports hold an equal footing. I think that is a myth. I think that is palpably wrong when you deal with complex adaptive systems that are human beings. And so subsequently, I think level 1 and level 2 coaching qualifications should primarily be, as dispiriting as this might sound to sports enthusiasts, should primarily be psychosocial in content, because you are coaching human beings. And so subsequently, although my idea of, well, should personal trainers have some kind of CBT training or training in some kind of psychological framework, I believe that personal trainers who take up courses, those national governing bodies have a responsibility to help trainers, personal trainers, sports coaches become better equipped in the psychosocial, I use the word psychosocial because I don't love psychosocial, but psychosocial components. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and actually that's part of the work that I do at the Premier League.
Right.
Is exactly that,
Yeah.
and it's a bolt-on actually to the technical and tactical qualifications that you get, certainly in football anyway. But the CBT side of things is quite an interesting suggestion in its own right.
I would understand there would be a certain amount of expertise, and maybe me saying CBT is not the correct statement, but some form of, Claire Marie, even just having some solution-focused brief therapy skills, some form of linguistic tools that these people who deal with other people, who help other people, whose communication mediate others' attitudes in this environment. That's no small thing. That's important.
No. I completely agree, and I think the other thing that's really important, that is an extension of your point, is the importance of people being able to understand where to refer individuals if they detect that they've got some kind of issue that might lead them down this path. So, to individuals understanding that certain behaviours are indicators of potential IPED use, or certain symptoms, physical symptoms that they're experiencing might indicate the individuals are using IPEDs, and being able to signpost them to a profession or a service that can help. And one of the most important things in that context is being non-judgmental, because as soon as there's judgment that's sort of handed down on that front, you've lost the individual completely. So you do have an opportunity to intervene. You do have an opportunity to signpost them. Whether they go or not and seek help is, is something that you're not going to be able to control, but at least that there is an ability for people to identify those that are at risk and to try and intervene where appropriate. So I think that's part and parcel of a really solid sort of education system that we need to consider for people that work in gyms, gym owners and personal trainers.
And do you think that means that we in sports psychology need to be better at marketing? I know it's a crass word, but let's use it. Marketing our wares, because I think quite often, possibly, I'm going to throw in a strong hypothesis here. Some people, gym goers, might use performance-enhancing drugs when actually basic psychological skills training could have an enormous impact on the kind of performance and the kind of advantages, physical advantages that they want to get, but in a clean, safe way.
And again, really, really interesting point. And I think you're right. Actually, as sports psychologists, I don't think we market ourselves particularly well. I think people have a very narrow view of what we do. And I think people have a very narrow view of who we work with as well. And, the skills that sports psychology practitioners have are as relevant in elite sport as they are in recreational sport, and indeed arguably even outside of sport. So I think again you're absolutely right. I think it's definitely something to consider, but it is very difficult, I think, to change the public perception of a particular discipline. So I think it would be a really interesting discussion to consider how that's done, and to promote the work that sports psychology does outside of that sort of stereotypical, elite sport environment.
Absolutely, I'm trying. I think we all are.
It'd be good to have a podcast on it, for example.
No. I think we need to make it more intriguing and interesting and engaging for people who aren't elite or don't want to be elite, because I think, as you quite rightly say, it's pertinent for them as well. And I do think there is a strand of solution in what we do with regard to the IPED use. Listen, before we wrap up here, I'm also aware that it was Mental Health Awareness Week last week, wasn't it?
That's right.
It's
yes.
around this time, and I know that week was. A lot of the messages from that week were around body image.
Correct.
And that must have a strong relationship. People's relationship with their body must bear a strong relationship with their drivers to use iPEDs.
Absolutely. So that's that link between mental ill health and iPED use, and again body image related. So for men, stereotypically, muscle dysmorphic disorder. So when they feel that their body is not big or strong enough, and that might lead them down the IPED route. And then again for women who tend to have a different perspective on body image, which is that they're not lean enough, might lead them down the IPED route when we think about sort of diet pills and fat burners and diuretics and things like that. So there is a distinct difference between men and women in the body image stakes, but equally as concerning, equally as risky. And I think when we think of IPEDs, we think about anabolic steroids, but actually it's a wide label for lots of different substances that sit under that. As I mentioned before, things like tanning agents and stuff like that. So you've got the sort of the drugs that lead to increased muscle mass, and then those that are associated with a reduction of body weight and things like that. So yes, the whole concept of mental ill health, body image and iPED use are inextricably linked. And I think Clean Sport Week and Mental Health Awareness Week being so close together, I think it's a great opportunity for us to sort of again raise awareness of this issue and really get this conversation out into the public sphere and start talking about it more openly.
Fantastic. Well, Claire Marie, where can people find out more about Clean Sport Week?
So you can follow UK Anti-Doping on Twitter, and you'll find lots of athletes and advocates of clean sport supporting the efforts of Clean Sport Week. But the UKAD's Twitter page is a good place to start. And of course, the fantastic resource that's provided by UK Anti-Doping on their website. Their website is an absolute hive of useful information. And there's a dedicated web page on Clean Sport Week with a number of different resources and links to lots of different pieces of information that can help people should they want to investigate it more.
Fantastic. And given that together in the last half an hour we've changed the landscape of British sport by insisting that national governing bodies on their level 1 and level 2 course have more psychosocial material, I'm sure the audience will really want to know how they can find out more about yourself. So do you have a Twitter handle and a website page?
I do. So my Twitter handle is @RobertsCM, and my academic life, my university webpage is accessible through the University of the West of England website. So I think that will provide enough information about me and the work that I do.
Fantastic. Well, look, Claire Marie, thank you so much for coming on today and giving us some thoughts on the Clean Sport Week. And I do recommend everybody go onto that website. It's absolutely fascinating. I've learned a lot more about the use of iPEDs and participative sport. So it's really, really important. And look, I really enjoyed that podcast. I'd love to hear what you, the listener, thinks. So please do get in touch with me via Twitter or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me exactly what you think of the show. And if you do have any suggestions, I'd be delighted to hear them, and I'll try and put into practice exactly what you recommend. So I'm really looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.